Good afternoon to all those who are here. Well, over 100 participants at this very important intercessory afternoon. So I decided I would speak a little bit about signs, in as much we have that mentioned in today's gospel. So in today's gospel, Jesus talks about signs. He says there will be signs in the sun and moon and stars, on earth nations in agony, bewildered by the clamor of oceans and its waves. And in the New Testament, signs are seen both in a positive light and in a negative light. In a negative light, for instance, in John 4, verse 48, Jesus says, unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe. And then also in the Gospel of St. Luke, chapter 11, verse 29, Jesus says, this is a wicked generation. It is asking for a sign. And now, in a sense, nothing is wrong with signs, but the better thing is let the Lord give it to you and the better to ask him for it. That's the better thing about signs. But our way is not like that. We don't wait for the Lord to ask us about signs. We demand signs. And that, of course, is not in keeping with the New Testament trust for Jesus. The sign above all is a total trust in him. So I remember some years ago, I had gone to Britannia, and we went in this place where the apparition of Mary was supposed to be taking place. And there was a lovely wall there, quite a long wall, and the wall had hundreds of little plaques on it. And I found that very telling and proof that the Mother of Jesus was working miracles for people. That was perhaps the most impressive thing about the trip, to see that faith is really working. However, there was a certain uneasiness, because certainly people went there looking for signs, and therefore if the breeze blew a little hard, people were looking up in the trees to see what is happening in the trees. Maybe Mary is appearing in the trees, or sometimes if something, maybe the sun might go down a bit and then it brightens up, and they look into the sky and they say, look, the face of Mary, the face of Jesus. You know, if you look into the clouds too long, you'll see anything you want. So that isn't the approach that we are invited to take. And so signs in the New Testament, of course, have in many instances, as Jesus himself recognizes here, a negative component. But signs also have a positive component as well. When we look at Matthew 16, verses 2-3, when Jesus tells the people that you look around in nature and so on, and you can tell things are going to happen, how is it that you cannot interpret those famous words, the signs of the times? And so that is what we are called to reflect on a bit today, the signs of the times that we are in. And there are many signs coming from two big areas in our world at present. We have the sign of the pandemic. And in the pandemic, we are seeing quotations, as it were, of what the gospel talks about. On earth, nations in agony. And so we are seeing many deaths, a hospital that is almost overwhelmed. We are seeing all these signs. And we are in agony because so many people have chosen to be unvaccinated. So the pandemic brings one, is in itself a big sign, and in it other signs. And then we also have climate change. And that also is a big sign to us. How have we been treating Mother Nature? And again, we are told in the gospel passage, nations bewildered by the clamor of the ocean and its waves. And so we are seeing rising sea levels, we are seeing increase in temperatures, we are seeing flooding, hurricanes, and so on. So in these two areas, we look around and we see what is happening in the case of the pandemic, and also in the case of climate change. and we ask ourselves, what do these signs mean to us as people of faith, but also people in general? However, I want to shift a gear from these two signs of climate change and the pandemic to talk a little bit about some of the signs that we are seeing in the church today. On one hand, the signs will be negative, but towards the end, it will shift to a more positive mood. Because in the New Testament itself, as I said, we have this ambivalence over signs. On one hand, Jesus tells us to interpret the signs of the times, and on the other hand, he is rebuking us for demanding a sign. And so the gospel is going to guide us as we encounter signs in our lives and in our church. So what are some of the signs that we see, for instance, in our church? And over Masses this weekend, I had asked my parishioners to put up their hands or their fingers according to a certain question. And so 10% one finger, 20% two fingers, 50% five fingers, and so on. And my question was, if they had to guess, what would they say was our pre-pandemic practicing percentage? How often do Catholics go to Mass on weekends? What percentage of Catholics? On the Saturday night, the lowest was 20. People there said 20%, 30%, quite a few 40%, and a few even 50%. When it came to the morning and I asked them the same question, I saw the same figures, 20, 30, 40, 50, but three hands also said 10%. And they were waiting, of course, with bated breath. And I said, the answer is 14%. So those who put up one finger, they were closer to the accurate figure. And we need to ask ourselves, what is that sign saying to us? When we look at these percentages, what is this? What are these signs saying to us? What does it tell us about church? Also, if I now shift to confirmation, I remember many years ago, after maybe about a week or two after confirmation, I was talking to this young man, and he said to me, "Father, tell me something. In confirmation, I am supposed to receive the 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit, right?" I said, "Yes." He said, "How come I feel I have none?" You see? How come I feel I don't have none? I also went to a confirmation mass of a Catholic boys' school, and the Archbishop, of course, was there preaching. And after the confirmation, the boys came out of the church and they ripped off their ties, their school ties, and unbuttoned their shirts halfway down. Not all of them, but some of them. And I read in that sign, this thing finished, thank God, we let out of this cage of confirmation. That's the idea I got. And yet we say that after confirmation, they are supposed to be soldiers for Christ, young soldiers for Christ. They pick up their weapons and they fight. Well, after the confirmation mass, they put down their weapons. They decide they're not going to fight anymore. When we look, for instance, at infant baptism, we also see that the whole notion of godparent has become something reduced to my friend. It has no faith component anymore in most instances. And in my experience, since the Catholic practicing percentage is that low, Catholic parents themselves are finding it hard to find Catholic godparents. And they more quickly find Open Bible and Pentecostal godparents. So we are a church and we are unable to find godparents for our babies. And some churches, they have this form and the parish priest has to sign it. Yes, this person is fully initiated. This person comes to Mass now and then regularly and so on. Yes, I endorse this person as a sponsor. And I was looking at some of these forms, and one of them was signed by the Baptist minister and another one by the Pentecostal minister. So what is that saying to us as church? It seems to be saying that we don't understand what this foundational sacrament, the one on which all the other sacraments build on, we don't seem to understand what infant baptism or baptism in general is all about. So the question is, how do we get out of this ecclesiological quagmire that we are in at the moment? Can we get out of it? And the answer is, of course, I think we can get out of it, but not in a short haul. I think it will take years for us to come out of this. But as today's gospel says, towards the end, that we have to stand with confidence before the Son of Man. And so that means whatever good we are doing, we have to keep doing it, expanding it, letting it become new seeds that flourish, new plants that are flowering, new shrubs that are growing. We continue doing the good that we are doing. We stay the course. And in the long term, I am sure we are going to see signs of success. Now, Advent, as I think we should all know, talks about three comings. We have the coming of Jesus, that time in history. We have when he will come again. And then very important for Lectio Divina is that Christ always comes. If you call him, he comes. However, we may not see when he comes because we are not looking at our context with the eyes of faith. And so today's gospel tells us, in its typical apocalyptic Advent imagery, that the Son of Man is going to come on a cloud with power and great glory. And that is an apocalyptic description of what will happen at the end of time. But it is also true in the present time if we look with the eyes of faith. And that is, if we look with the eyes of faith, we will see the Son of Man in this crisis, in this confusion, coming to us on a cloud with great power and glory. So the time in which we are in, my dear friends, is also a fruitful time, a time for us to experience Advent, to long for a better church, a new kind of church, to dream of different kinds of parishes and ecclesial communities, so that we truly experience by our efforts as if the Son of Man is coming on a cloud with great power and glory. In the midst of the negative signs darkening the sun and moon and stars of the church, I think we can see some positive signs. And what is a sign of, what is a big sign God has given to us of something that is positive? I think the Synod 2023, for which we are making preparations at the moment. And the Synod is a time for us to imagine the Son of Man coming on a cloud with great power and glory. But that is subject to certain conditions. Because if we are to experience that in this time in which we live, we must be able to answer hard questions. We know the expression, facts are stubborn things. Now you can accept the facts or you can play that you don't see them. You can turn your head away. And so in this time of synod in which that we are preparing for, we need to look around and ask ourselves some very hard questions. For instance, are we confronting the truth and seeing what there is? Whom have we alienated by our leadership style? Not only as priests, but as lay leaders in the parish, because in discussion for the Archdiocesan Pastoral Plan in 2018 and 19, a parish came up with a memorable expression and said that things cannot get done in the parish because there's a small clique controlling it. What you are looking at is favoritism, narcissism, exclusivism, and materialism, all the isms you can imagine. Are we aware that we have alienated people by our leadership style? Whom have we hurt by our preaching? So many people who are divorced and remarried are read the letter of the law, and because of that, we have made them feel like second-class and third-class citizens. We have not entered sufficiently into the pain of those who are living good lives, but who, because of the laws of the church, cannot receive Holy Communion. And Pope Francis was trying to address that. How is it that people are living very good lives and we deny them Holy Communion for the rest of their lives because of their marital situation? Are we listening as a church? Then we also have the whole issue of the gender problem, the LGBT group. And again, we have to be careful of our language, for in the past we have used terms like intrinsically evil and making people feel as if they are intrinsically evil, and also proclaiming from the highest heavens that the sin of homosexuality is the worst sin in the Bible. As far as I'm aware, it is not. The worst sin is injustice and hardness of heart. And many of us can be guilty of that. We also have lost touch, I think, with those who are sick and are grieving. And we need to ask ourselves that even though the government placed restrictions upon us, have we reached out by telephone, by WhatsApp, by video chat, and so on? Have we reached out to those who are grieving? One thing the pandemic showed us is how many poor people we have, both poor on one hand and working poor on the other. We were perhaps more accustomed with the poor, but then with the pandemic and the working poor came to the fore. They all came out of the woodwork. We saw who they were. Their salaries couldn't stretch because they were getting none or were being paid half of what they are accustomed paying. And then we were suddenly aware, it was in our face, as it were, the working poor and our being out of touch with their reality and what they were going through. So now, my dear friends, that's why I said the Synod, I think, is a time of hope. It is a time of possibilities, because we can imagine through the Synod process and after, the Son of Man trying to come down to us on a cloud with power and great glory. And we have to be careful that we say, look, go back up there. We don't want you to come down right now. Give us a couple of years again. But we need to come down right. He needs to come down right now. I think if we look around, we will see good news taking place. So the signs are not all bad signs. The Synod, of course, calls us to do certain things. The Synod calls us, first of all, to listen. And, sometimes our parents just ring our ears and say, you have hard ears, you're not listening. So, and Jesus also says in the gospel, they hear and hear again, but will not listen. They see and see again, but will not perceive. So the Synod calls us to listen and not just hear, and to perceive. And then after listening, we perceive through discernment, something that is very strong in the charismatic movement and in the ecclesial communities, the gift of discernment and discerning what must be done. So why do I think it is a time that is filled with hope? I think it is a time filled with hope because there are good things happening on the ground already. And you, the ecclesial communities and members of those communities are already in touch with some of the people I have mentioned here in a way that the parish or the parishes are not. And so we are not starting from scratch. We have good work taking place already. What we have to do is to share the skill set, to share the strategies, the insights, and to let them filter into the parishes as well. So some of the things that are happening through the ecclesial communities will also happen with the parish as well. Of course, the parish has a heavier administrative structure in dialoguing with all the departments and so on, and getting all the sacramental work done. But that should not be our excuse during the synod process. The good that the ecclesial communities are doing in reaching out to people that we do not reach out to sufficiently is a work that needs to be expanded and developed more comprehensively in all the parishes. I also think there is good news on the horizon, the Son of Man coming on a cloud with power, because there are laity outside there who want to get involved. But sometimes we prevent them from getting involved. And they are not only laity who have their particular secular skill set, some of them have started doing theology as well, quite unknown to us. And I think that if we were to become like a doctor and take our stethoscope and start sounding, we will find quite a number of people who have gone on their own, I want to add, not inspired by their parish priests, but who have gone on their own, inspired by the Holy Spirit, and something moving in them, people involved in ecclesial communities, people outside of ecclesial communities, and they have signed up and they have done courses with universities abroad and so on. I am sure we would be shocked if we were ready to go searching the number of lay folk that we have who have already qualified themselves in some measure of Bible, theology, new evangelization, and so on. A third thing working in our favor, I think, is while our practicing ratio is relatively small at 14%, and in some parishes maybe even smaller, what is good is that people are not atheistic generally. There are many people outside there, particularly young people. They are searching for spirituality in words they can understand, in experiences they can treasure. And we have to listen to them and stop fussing and saying the liturgy has to look like this all the time. We are a people of different cultural and historical backgrounds, and we can cater our liturgies to fit the needs of our people. And so we need to tap in, because you have other organizations, non-church organizations, and so on, that are tapping into these things. And we cannot leave them behind. As religious organizations, as parishes, as ecclesial communities, we have to tap into that taste that is already there among our young people and among all of us, all those who are longing to see a different kind of church. So the signs on one hand, as I said, were negative, that drew us into concern. But when we look more closely, we see other signs that are developing in our parishes, in our ecclesial community, in our church. And these signs are very encouraging, because it tells us that if we pursue these signs, understand them, and act on what these signs indicate to us, we will truly experience at some point the Son of Man coming on a cloud in great power and glory. Finally, my brothers and sisters, Pope Francis tells us in his wonderful exhortation to young people, Christus vivi, that Christ is alive. We, especially we who study theology and we who sometimes have to teach, we talk about the church being ancient, an ancient institution going back 2,000 years. We have a long and rich tradition. And Pope Francis turns that on its head, and he says the church is forever young. The church is forever young, that we are a young church. And isn't that a nice way of looking at things? That instead of saying we are 2,000 years old, we can say we are 2,000 years young. And there is so much to happen in the future. He also tells the young people, don't be bystanders. Don't be bystanders. Take a risk. Become somewhat reckless. Dive inside here. And we have to do the same as well. We also have to dive in. And to not be dismayed by the negative signs, because it is not so much the church that we are, but the church that we can become. And so, my dear friends, let us appeal to the Spirit, as we are doing right now and throughout this synod process. Ask Almighty God to help us to have that eye of faith, that heart of hope, to see the Son of Man coming on a cloud in great power and glory. For he does come when we call him and ask him to come. The Spirit does come and is coming and will come to renew the face of the church and renew the face of the earth. I thank you.